Okay. All right, Doug. We're
So
going again.
so anyhow, Eugene, he was a little bit bigger than this, and and you don't think of it at the time, but you can see that he'd probably been in a lot of different schools. Being his dad and mom and family moved. And Eugene was, even though he had a brace on his leg, he could shoot, he could run and play basketball in the gym. He also chewed tobacco. Now this over seventh grade school, but I remember he didn't come for a while, and it was getting close to Christmas time. And of course, back then you'd draw names and get a gift for somebody who was in your class. And I don't know whether I had Eugene's name, but we got a present, or he had a present there, and he didn't show up, and I'll never forget it because he came in there with his. They drove in a pickup truck, and it was snowing in the thing, spitting snow out the back. Eugene was in the back of that pickup truck because it was full. Family was in the front. It was just a one-seater, and he was in the back. Had on them old Naugahyde jackets, those plastic that the kids had back then. And he came and he got his Christmas present. And then they drove out, and he was in the back of that pickup truck whenever they left. And I thought they were originally from West Virginia, is where they were from. And I've always wondered. He was a nice kid. I remember he had real wavy hair. Not real long, but I always wonder what happened to some of the kids. So
Did he come back after
no,
Christmas?
he started in the fall. He started late, like in October, and by Christmas time they was ready to move on. They had finished the section, and so they just had to move. Where as the road moved on, they just kept moving west with it. So that's yeah.
You wonder. I had a kid when I was in sixth grade, and I drew her name, and for Christmas,
Mm-hmm.
and they were a very poor family. We were out in the middle of nowhere. Well, it was '82, so that was the last recession besides the past one.
Oh yeah.
And she wanted a pair of mittens, and I didn't want to get her the mittens. That's all she asked for, because we had to write a thing over what we wanted for Christmas. And but I didn't get them for her because I didn't want anybody to think that I liked her.
Oh.
You know how boys are.
Oh yeah.
And it's one of those silly, dumb things that I regret.
Well,
Even now as an adult, I think, man, I wish I just would have got her those mittens.
well, that's.
But I can't remember her name or anything.
Yeah. Well, I can't remember his last name. All I remember is his name was Eugene, and he was. We had, of course, he had one of the boys that thought he was the toughest one there in school, and of course he's been to jail and now ever since then. But he and Eugene kind of butted heads there for a while. But Eugene being he was a little bit older, he come out on top. So it was yeah. But see, we did. Jackson Township was pretty isolated down there. We didn't get a lot of influx and outflux. It's not like when you were moving around the schools or a big city. We just didn't see a lot of that. Most of the kids were all the same. I mean, yeah, you knew some kids maybe had a little bit more than that, but most everybody was all on the same economic plane, really. I mean, back then, farmers. You made a living. That's what you did. It wasn't, farmers then farmed 150 acres, made a living off that, or 200, and that's what you did. And your mom maybe worked a job, or dad had a part-time job. That, and yeah, it's totally different now.
How many acres do you farm altogether?
We farm right around 950 acres, yeah. And that keeps me busy. We did farm more than that. We had farmed about 1,400 acres, and that's whenever our oldest two boys, I thought they wanted to farm, and they had about over 400 acres of ground rented between them, and Matt was little at the time, and that was about 8 years ago. And I told Carolyn, I said, and they both were, and I said, no, we ain't killing ourselves for doing it. If they can't come home and help, we're not going to kill ourselves doing it. So and told the boys, I said, you're going to give up the ground, because I said, your mom and I aren't going to kill ourselves doing it.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's been a bad decision. So
Yeah. Yeah, Matt, he's into farming, isn't he? He's
yeah,
gonna
I
be a farmer.
think Matt wants to stay around home. It's
Yeah.
now see, you went to college and you want to stay around here, but many times people go to college, they I guess they want to leave. You know, they don't. It's too confining where they were raised at or whatever.
Yeah.
They want to see a bigger side of the world, and on you, on the other hand, you're wanting to see what everybody's did and where they came from, which
Yeah.
is commendable, Paul. I like that. That's
Well, I have age that's helping me with that too.
yeah.
You know, if I was in the boat where I didn't have kids
Mhm.
here, going to school here, boyfriends, girlfriends here,
Oh yeah.
I'd be more inclined to maybe go see a bigger side.
Well, yeah, yeah.
But I'm rooted now. You know, I
Mhm.
always thought, well, if I'm gonna move, I better do it before Mercedes turns 14.
Mm-hmm.
Because as soon as she starts boyfriends, then I'm here forever. I'm here forever now.
Well, that's all. There's not a thing wrong with that. There's you can, what do they call it, blossom where you grow at.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be said for that. So
What is it? All journeys, all roads lead back to home.
yeah.
You know, it
Yeah.
seems like you always wind up there. So you have around 900 acres, and we know
Mhm.
that two of the boys are, you know, Kansas City and
Louisville. Jordan's in Louisville now. Yeah, he's a buyer for Texas Roadhouse. He's going to. Carolyn talked to him this morning, and he's going to go to Virginia to look at peanuts. The Texas Roadhouse, you know, they have them peanuts that you eat before you go in. I've only been over there about 2 or 3 times. I don't know, but Carolyn said, you don't go to Georgia down there where Jimmy Carter, he says, no, he said, evidently the peanuts in Virginia are bigger and they like the bigger peanuts, which I didn't know that. But that's what he told her. And Chris, he's in Kansas City and he's working for a company that buys and sells grain, DDGs and dried distilled grains and corn and wheat and beans. And
with your farming, that is, or just your lifetime overall, is there one thing that you can pinpoint that has maybe had more influence over your happiness than others? Because you seen, you know, you and Carolyn both. When I first met Carolyn 6 or 7 years ago, she's bubbly and joyful, you know.
Oh,
and
yeah.
and then when I met you a couple years ago, that's one of the first things I noticed is that, you know, you both seem just really happy and content.
Well, I think it's just, I think we enjoy each other. And one of the ministers that I think our faith has a lot to do with it. But one of our ministers, and it's always stuck with me. He said, God comes first, and he said, then your wife comes second. He said, you know, that's number 2. He said, you got to make sure that's your buddy and that's your spouse. He said, your family's third. And he said, your neighbors are fourth. And he said, fifth comes to church. He said that's, and that put a lot of things in perspective.
Mm-hmm.
That was, and he's probably about 90 years old now, Reverend Gettinger, but he'd been married 3 times. He's lost 2 wives. First one to cancer, and the second one, I don't know whether she died of cancer or not. And the third lady he married is one he had her named Sue, and she was, when he was a camp counselor, she was one of his student, or one of the kids, so, but he was, so yeah, your spouse is number 2, God's number 1, and your wife's number 2, and don't forget it. So
That's pretty good advice.
yeah.
I have to tell Jenny that. She'll agree with you.
Yeah, our pastor down at Reverend Hayes. Now, he's been married 3 times. His first marriage ended in divorce, and only because, and they had a child, and he joined the Navy. He had been a carpenter for a couple of years out of high school, and then he joined the Navy, and she wouldn't go with him. She said no, she wasn't going to go, and then she divorced him. And then his second wife, she died of breast cancer, and then he wasn't going to get married again, but he met Angela over in Scotland, and they got married. So anyhow, that was. But he's a nice fellow, Reverend Haynes is. When I've been sick, he's been there. You know, when we talked to him, and he's been there and talked with us, and yeah, he's a good egg. So now I was going to tell you the story about the. This came from my grandfather's spelling too. Of course, he knew the fellows, but just right south of west of Center Point, and north of Asheboro, Romases had a farm over there. It was Jim and Alice Romases. It was Jim's grandfather, and they were putting up hay, or they was either putting up hay or they were thrashing wheat. And there was a thunderstorm come up, and they shut down. And there was 4 men, and all 4 of them went into the barn.